Welcome into the Hot Read Podcast live for Tuesday, October the 8th. I am your host, JT Ruhnke. You can follow me at JT_Ruhnke. I am the producer, host, and writer here at Broadway Sports Media, joined by the lovely Stoney, Keeley, editor-in-chief of Sobros Network, 1/3 of Football and Other F Words, and co-writer over at Stacking the Inbox. Stoney, how are we doing today?
You know, I've had better days, and we can lead off with this if you want to, but John Ojukwu getting waived means the official death of Ojukwu mania, something I've been a proponent of for the better part of a year now. I greatly appreciate all of the responses, people that have asked to keep me in their thoughts, checking to see if I'm okay, the apologies, the condolences. It means a lot to me, but you know, maybe a lesser man might have skipped today's show, but I'm not a lesser man. The show must go on. We have some Tennessee Titans to talk about, and that's why we're here, a couple of dogs on the Hot Read podcast.
Yeah, and I mean, you wanted to start off. That's where I was going to start as well, because as someone who once claimed that Ojukwu mania was thrown in the fire and was burned alive to a crisp, there was somehow a way that it comes back, and Ojukwu mania is alive yet again. And then after he was inactive for the first 3 games of the season, he played 5 snaps in this Miami Dolphins game, and then is subsequently released from the team.
I think the surprising thing for me, though, JT, is just looking at how bad NPF was in the Packers game that he ultimately was benched in, and then seeing Jalen Duncan perform even worse. I mean, I'm a Jalen Duncan apologist. I have been for a long time. I like the talent. I love the movement ability, that sort of thing. But he was not good against the Packers. They didn't even give John Ojukwu a chance in this right tackle battle. So what are they seeing that is so drastically worse than those two that he's the odd man out here? He's the 53rd man that they're getting rid of, perhaps to make another move. I don't know. I mean, it's just me. I'm just like, how does he end up being the guy out of the picture here?
Yeah, and I think you can take solace in the fact that there are a lot of people consoling you in the comments there. Eddie saying, moment of silence for Stoney and Ojukwu mania. Kenneth saying, sorry for your loss, Stoney. Zach saying, lay rip. Shrike saying, JT wearing black appropriate morning attire for Ojukwu mania for Stoney. Well, maybe it's a double meaning there for you, Stoney. And Jake saying, rip to the boy.
Can I explain Ojukwu mania, though, for people that are watching that might not know exactly what it is?
This is the eulogy. You are going up to the stand right now to give your speech as they lower the cast 6 feet under. So
I've done a few draft cycles now, and what I mean by that is we put out a 275 prospect draft guide on Stacking the Inbox this year. I did 200 prospects the year before, really, growing into this role, and put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it. You watch a lot of tape, you watch a lot of prospects so that you can be ready if and when one of these guys ends up on the team that you cover. In this case, the Titans. We cover the Titans. John Ojukwu is one of those fringe guys. He ends up here as an undrafted free agent. I do my homework on him, and I say, hang on a second, guys. There's something here. This Ojukwu guy can play. And so, I understand I do have a reputation for going after hyping up a lot of these undrafted guys that I think can play in the league. But when you see, like, you put the hard work in, and you say something out loud for hundreds, maybe even thousands of people to see, and then it actually starts to click. And we saw that during the summer when John Ojukwu was getting the first team reps at right tackle for the Titans. So, it's easy for me, having done the homework and liked this guy and saying publicly, hey, this is a bargain guy that could contribute at some point. I tend to get wrapped up in the hype, because I'm looking at myself like, man, you hit on one, Stoney. Like, you hit on this undrafted, offensive tackle from Boise State that nobody watched. Nobody knew who he was except for James Foster. James Foster's the only person prior to that draft that I saw speaking John Ojukwu name. Always props to James Foster. But when it finally starts to come to fruition, you start seeing the snaps. It's like, man, I might have had something here. And that's what it slipped right through my fingertips. Didn't even get a chance. I thought, Stoney, you had something here with John Ojukwu, and now he's gone before he ever got a real shot.
Beautiful words there, Stoney, to kind of close it out there on the John Ojukwu. Hey, I mean, he's risen once. Who's saying he can't rise again? That is there, the story on John Ojukwu is not fully written yet, I think, for sure. But this is a all-encompassing Titans podcast, and we have to move on with our lives. You don't want to, but you have to. And that's what we're here to do, because you do bring up an important point here as is this indicative of a move incoming here for the Titans? You look at a couple options for them with this move. One is Cedric Gray, who Brian Callahan announced in his press availability yesterday that the practice window for the Titans' fourth-round rookie would be open this week, meaning I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, he now has 3 weeks for the team to activate him. Could this be a move that indicates that he's ready to go now instead of maybe needing another week or two? I'm not sure if it is a move. This isn't another interesting one because this is a prospect that both of us, I think, talked a lot about in this draft cycle, and in the preseason process, didn't really flash a lot. And now that you have Ernest Jones and Kenneth Murray playing a lot, what is his role exactly in this offense? I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't get a lot of snaps with the defense, but more as a special teamer here for the team going forward. But is this a move for him? And with Cedric Gray coming back, does that, bring up the question, was this move worth it when you considering how bad the right tackle position has been for this team?
Yeah, I think it's puzzling on a couple of different fronts, because you would think that you would want more bodies in the competition to cycle through guys that aren't performing that well. I thought PF answered the bell a little bit against the Dolphins. They helped him a lot with tight ends, and he wasn't in as precarious positions as often as he was against the Packers, but I don't think he did anything to really solidify that job. And Brian Callahan has said as much. It's going to be a competition week out. I think they're going to go with whoever is playing well at the moment. I don't think the leash is going to be very long for either guy, but I would have thought that you wanted a wider select tackles to choose from to slot guys in. So they must feel good with AF and Jalen Duncan going for the job, and they must have something in place for Cedric Gray if that is indeed the plan here, is to get him activated and get him on the main roster, which again, I don't know. I don't know why with Kenneth Murray and with Ernest Jones the fourth, you would want to insert him onto the main roster at this point. It kind of felt like a situation they were going to take their time with, that he was going to kind of grow into the role. Once you had Ernest Jones with Kenneth Murray playing the way he was playing throughout the preseason, you kind of look at it and you say, okay, there's really no need to elevate Cedric Gray just yet. So I am kind of curious as to what that would say about what they view amongst their linebackers, how they view their linebackers, if that were to indeed be the move that they made here.
Yeah, it certainly makes that room once again pretty crowded. As the comments say that robot Stoney activated. Stoney caught the Mike Herndon internet bug. Maybe that's the ghost of John Ojukwu haunting
That's just me
already. That's
just how I talk.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, you just let out your real accent there.
Yeah.
But no, we can still hear you loud and clear. That came through. Mostly, we get the sentiment there that Cedric Gray feels like more of a developmental piece at this point. It's kind of crazy to see how far we've gone on the Cedric Gray experience so far. Once drafted in the 4th round, and we were immediately saying, this is your green dot guy, to now here. Life comes at you fast, and maybe another lesson that we shouldn't take us analysts at face value, and that things change very quickly for them.
Yeah.
But I do think that it is important for this guy who is a developmental piece to get him back into the system, because you do know that there are a lot of good traits there, and he can become a impact player for you in the future. And to learn under guys like Ernest Jones, I think is important for a guy like Cedric Gray.
For sure. I think it's interesting to look back on the offseason, JT, and I'm curious of what your opinion on this matter is. We may have already talked about this before, so if we have, forgive me. I have mush for brains. We talk about the Titans so much. It's like 24/7 in the group chats. I can never remember what's on air and what's in private. But if the team had known Ernest Jones IV was going to become available, do you think they still go into the draft and take Cedric Gray and James Williams? Because I think it would have come in real handy at this point if they had drafted another right tackle in the 4th round. Let's say a Christian Jones out of Texas, a guy that I was really high on. I don't think he's playing for Arizona right now, but I think it's interesting to look at the roster math that could have been when, you didn't really know what was going to happen with the Ernest Jones situation. That kind of seemed to have fortuitously fell into the lap of the Titans, and now they've got a high quality middle linebacker on their roster. I'm curious what you think about that.
I mean, I agree with you that there was, there are some really talented offensive linemen that we've seen kind of be, pop up already through 5 weeks. You look at Roger Rosengarten, who is playing kind of lights out ball for the Baltimore Ravens, and is kind of the reason why Derrick Henry has been so good to start the season for that team. He's looked really good. I'll enter the spin zone here and offer maybe with that 4th round pick, you go up and you trade up a couple spots and take Dominic Pooney. Is there a world out there where you do that with that early 4th round pick? These are all things that, you look at the infinite timelines and you try to cherry pick the best outcomes here. But I do agree with you that, as much promise as a James Williams or a Cedric Gray has, you wonder if that was in the cards earlier, how things would have turned out. But outside of Cedric Gray, it may not mean that this spot is for Cedric Gray, as the Titans also worked out Shaq Lawson and Terrell Lewis, two kind of more depth rotational pieces to add to your defense. It could also be one of those things there, but we'll have to see as we go on later in this week and maybe get the chance to talk to the offensive coordinator or even the offensive line coach, Bill Callahan, here later this week on their thoughts about that. Jake Robertson in the comments saying Javon Foster, who I don't know if I've not been keeping up on my Javon Foster stats and my scouting of him, or Zach Riley says DeMar Glaze was another correct. I'm not sure where he's ended up either, but
he's playing for Vegas. I don't know if he still is, but I know he's gotten in at right tackle too, which is another area where I watched him and was like, this dude cannot play at the edge. He struggled against Ohio State and Penn State, like the big dogs of the Big Ten. And I'm like, he's going to be a really good guard in the NFL. And the Raiders were like, no, we're going to play him at right tackle. And he's been serviceable so far, which is all you can ask of a day 3 rookie pick. Actually, I don't even know if he was drafted. He might have slipped through the cracks. He might have been undrafted. That's what it's the bye week. We can spend way too many minutes breaking down day 3 offensive tackles and where they're playing.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. Once again, this feels like a very dead portion because we don't want to get too into the weeds on who's Joe Flacco or is going to be Joe Flacco or Anthony Richardson. Although we will get into a little bit of that. And we got so caught up in this John Ojukwu funeral,
shocking news
in the wake.
I just said it was shocking.
Oh, shocking. I thought you were going to bring something else that was going to come up here, but almost forgot to mention that we are brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and Bluegrass Beverages. If you know 440, you know them. If not, we are happy to introduce you. They are our title sponsor of this show. More on them later, but we are brought to you by Sinkers Beverages. After have to get that advertisement in after kind of giving the people a moment to process the shocking news here. But before we get into some more Titans topics for sure, I want to bring up one more piece of news that came out today that I think was also shocking, and that has to do with the New York Jets canning Robert Saleh whether or not you think that was the right decision or not, this does have a little bit of a Titans angle that I wanted to kind of maybe go down this avenue here. Obviously, the New York Jets start out not how they thought they would. They definitely have Super Bowl or bust expectations. We knew coming into the season that Robert Saleh and Nathaniel Hackett, all of these guys in the coaching staff, in the coaching room, even the GM, they all knew that if there is not a Super Bowl berth or appearance or victory this season, all of their jobs are gone. And I think that is pretty indicative of this move right here, where 5 games into the season, Robert Saleh is canned after a lackluster start. I mean, the offense has not looked good. The defense, which is what kind of Robert Saleh's bread and butter is, has looked really good for the New York Jets, but you're not getting those wins, and it seems like this is a decision that came from ownership itself. Kind of has a little bit of shades of ownership kind of stepping in and making the decision here after a former high draft pick kind of beats up your own team, and the aspects and the storyline of that maybe get to you a little bit, but that's neither here or there to talk about. But I think the biggest thing from this news, and probably why Robert Saleh was canned, I don't know if you saw this. It came out about an hour beforehand, as this is an ever-evolving story. But sources, former Jets head coach Robert Saleh was never going to fire offensive coordinator Nathaniel Hackett. That was not happening. So it sounds like that was still intact. However, he was going to demote his game day responsibilities this week. Saleh made decision to give play calling to Todd Downing because of the continued issues on offense. He made that final decision Tuesday a.m. Then, roughly 5 minutes later, he was called into Woody Johnson's office and fired. Stoney, I just want to get your opinion on this here. Do you think that Woody Johnson fired Robert Saleh because he demoted Nathaniel Hackett and promoted Todd Downing?
Man, I don't know. I like the theory that Aaron Rodgers caught wind of it and picked up the phone and called Woody Johnson and said, "You've got to fire this guy," and he did it. I like that idea. There's a theory going around that it was because Robert Saleh wore a patch with the Lebanese flag on the hoodie. Like, there's all kinds of crazy stuff out there. But I think when you say turning over play calling duties to Todd Downing, I'm surprised he wasn't executed on the spot, to be honest with you. Just immediately someone pulls out a knife. I don't know. I think Robert Saleh is a pretty good defensive coach. I think the Jets were a really good defensive team. I know there are some players, like Mekhi Becton has tweeted today the picture of the man showing up to his hater's funeral or whatever. I know people, tend to think that he didn't have the best relationship with the guys on offense, but I think he has a really good track record with defense. And I think ultimately I think it was Garofalo report that he's going to take vacation for the rest of the year, spend time with his family, and then get rejuvenated for the next coaching cycle. I don't know that he's going to get a head job anywhere, but he is going to be a hot commodity for a team that needs a defensive coordinator. And I think that's where his bread and butter is. I think this situation in New York just kind of, and it's turned into a dumpster fire there. And I don't know. I mean, there's a part of me that thinks if I'm Robert Saleh today, I'm kind of sitting back in my recliner, processing everything, and maybe feeling a little bit of relief. I don't know. I would say it's never relieving to lose your job, but I've lost my job before, and I have gone home and had a beer and kicked back in my recliner and felt pretty relieved too. So why not in football? If I may, JT, I do have 2 Robert Saleh stories. One, he was coaching at the Senior Bowl down in 2022, and I went to the Senior Bowl player parade, and he was up on the float, and I just screamed his name and waved my arms, and he threw me a moon pie. So I ate it. I didn't keep it. I'm not going to keep a moon pie as a keepsake that the head coach of the New York Jets tossed me. But that was we'll always have that moment, Robert Saleh. If you're watching, we'll always have that moment down in Mobile, Alabama. Later on in that same trip, that same night, as a matter of fact, after the parade, Friday is the off day for the Senior Bowl, by the way. So we'd been drinking for the better part of the day. And this is before I went down with Zach. I went down with Stephen McCash of Sobros Network. And we had gone to see like Portugal the Man play the live concert. And then we were walking around downtown, just, a little buzzing. And we walked up to some hotel. We didn't even know it was a hotel. And we just like looked in the windows, and there's a staff meeting with Robert Saleh talking to all the coaches at the Senior Bowl. And the door in the hotel is just open. And we're just kind of standing there, like trying to drunk process, like, what have we just stumbled into? And he looked at us like, please get these homeless people away from me. Security. And we just kind of backed off and walked away like, oh, sorry, we're not supposed to be here. Clearly we're going to keep walking. Those are my two Robert Saleh stories. Rest in peace.
Wow. I mean, I have a lot of questions, actually, two. One, there's a Senior Bowl parade. I did not know that this was a thing.
Yeah. Well, they do.
I mean, I had my first Senior Bowl experience last year, and I showed up. I had no idea or recollection of a parade whatsoever.
So you guys left on Friday though, didn't you?
Yes. I
yeah.
believe so.
Yeah, Zach and I stayed through the weekend. We stayed through the game, got up and drove home Sunday morning. But on Friday, they do a free concert downtown Mobile. One year was the first year I went was Portugal the Man. The second year, I want to say Counting Crows did it.
That sounds right.
And then this year was Nelly. And so it's that off day, Friday. There's no practices. Nobody's doing anything. That night, they do a parade through downtown Mobile, Alabama, where all the players get to walk, and they have floats, and the coaches are up on the floats, and they have corporate sponsors, all kinds of people walking, and it's a good time. You just stand on the side of the streets, and they throw out candy to all the children. It's kind of wild, honestly, to be a part of. And that year, Robert Saleh threw me an individually wrapped moon pie, and then my buddy McCash with me got hit with an entire box. One of the players just threw an entire box of moon pies and just hit him, bounced off his chest, and he caught it. And he's like, fuck is this? But yeah, they do a parade and a free concert, and you can just go get boozed up. And that's the best time, man. That's one of my favorite parts of the week.
That's awesome. I never knew that would happen, but hey, let's talk a little bit of Titans before we get out of here, because I don't know about you. Well, you probably don't care, but Pete Alonso just hit a home run, and now the Mets are up 1-0, and I need to have a beer and sit on my couch and watch this Mets game, but can't do that without our lovely sponsors, Sinkers Beverages, who have been serving the East Nashville location or area for over 4 decades. They are a 3-time Best of Nashville Liquor Store of the Year. Got to be like me, myself, and Stoney, and join the in-crowd for all their special benefits, allocations, and events that they do. There's a lot of good ones coming up here soon, so you got to get into that in-crowd early to be a part of all of those benefits. And follow them on all their social media platforms at Sinkers Bev. And then if you can't get yourself out to their location, don't worry. They got you covered on Uber Eats. Simply just search Sinkers on Uber Eats and have the booze delivered to your house. Because remember, they drive so that you can drink responsibly. Also have to give a shout out to their sister store, Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville, who have been serving that location for over 50 years. Yeah, thank you once again to all of them. I see Jake in the comments here asking a very important question. Where do moon pies rank in the prepackaged pastry hierarchy? I'm going to let you do that, because I don't want to get into this conversation too much, but I don't think I've ever had / know what a moon pie is. So I'm going to leave this one to you. So
I just love, first of all, I just love that we are 30 minutes into this show and we've talked about John Ojukwu, Day 3 offensive lineman, Cedric Gray, the 2022 Senior Bowl, and now we're talking where do moon pies rank among the pastry hierarchy. I'm not the biggest moon pie fan. I think moon pies are going to rank pretty low on my list. I'm going through any of the Little Debbie prepackaged pastries before I even get to the moon pie. So I don't even know if it's top 10, to be honest with you. I like the flavor of a moon pie, the graham cracker cookie-ish kind of the cookie flavor with the marshmallow and the chocolate. I like a moon pie milkshake. There's a little spot at the oh god, I can't remember the place. There's a place in Chattanooga that does a moon pie milkshake, but no, it's going to be pretty low.
Okay, I like I said, I don't really know what a moon pie is, and I don't know what a moon pie is. I don't know what's going on in this Mets game. There's some absolutely crazy stuff going on, but
we're on
Titans
it today.
Titans talk. Let's move on and talk a little bit of Titans before we get out of here. And the biggest thing I want to talk about is what coming off the bye, we heard from Brian Callahan yesterday, and he gave his thoughts about the Titans coming off their bye and how they went about that and kind of where they are in the season right now. I think we talked about this a little bit on Friday's show, but going back to middle of July or June, whenever we really were talking about the schedule, it kind of seemed like a week 5 bye was super early for this team. But I mean, hindsight is 2020, and you look at the bye now, and it seems like it came at a perfect time where the Titans, they do get a win against the Miami Dolphins and start their season 1-3. But the 3 games before that were some pretty frustrating and gross losses for this team, and it almost feels like it's kind of a reset button for a team who may have needed it. And so we asked Brian Callahan about the bye this week, and here's what he had to say.
So you don't really control it. I mean, they give you the bye when they give you the bye, and you try to make the most of it whenever it is. This is probably the earliest I've had one. I don't remember having one at week 5. That's early, but probably the appropriate one for us. A month into the season, get a chance to really see what we've done over the first 4 weeks, where we need to get better. Certainly a lot of things to improve upon, and the injuries are a part of it. We've been relatively healthy, but yeah, there's certainly guys that needed the time, and again, we'll take it whenever they give it to us, and again, earlier than I would have hoped, but I think we made the most of it.
And so, earlier than you hope, obviously, because of the injury implications as well. They are relatively healthy, but there are a few key guys on this team. One being Will Levis, comes at a pretty decent time. Him getting into that game, getting hurt, but now getting the extra week to rest there. You look at a guy like Jeffrey Simmons as well. He's a guy that, when all things are said and done, needed the time as well to kind of get that elbow, which, is a Tommy John type of injury here. Get him a little bit more healthy. Obviously, he's not throwing a lot of footballs around, but that is going to be something that he's going to have to play through, and it's going to hinder him for the rest of the season. But it does give them a little bit of a break, especially coming off a grueling first 4 games. And now you kind of get into it here, where you look at a team like the Titans and where they are right now, just kind of going down where their odds stand for their entire season. And this is something that friend of the show, Zach Lyons, over at 104.5 The Zone and Stacking the Inbox, kind of laid out here to win the division. The Titans' chances here are 4.2%. You look at the wild card, their chance at a wild card, it goes up actually 11.6%. To get their mean wins for the season is 6.1, where their total this year, according to Sportsbooks, was 6.5. An AFC conference game appearance is 1.3%. An AFC conference game win is 0.4%. Super Bowl win, 0.1%. And then you look at the draft implications here. The first overall pick, they have an 8.3% chance to get their first overall pick. And then a top 5 pick, 38.7% chance to get a top 5 pick. And I saw earlier in the comments, there are some people who are already wanting to get onto that conversation. I think I saw Chef Rand say it was Shadur Sanders season already. Get out of here. I don't want to talk about that, nor even think about that whatsoever. But I think it goes to show that, even though it is a 4.2% chance to win their division, the Titans are not necessarily out of that, considering they have all of their division games ahead of them. And like we've said in continuing to say here. You win your division, you get into the playoffs and you have a chance. And so I think this was another question over the bye. We kind of asked Brian Callahan on with your players, do you take a step back and look at where you are in the standings here with your players and kind of take it maybe section by section and look at where you are compared to the rest of the league? And this is what he had to say about that.
I think it matters. We put those things up. We're aware of it. For us, especially, you sort of take a quarterly look, every 4 games or so on where things stand. And, our focus when the week starts is very narrow. We're trying to win this week. It's a week-to-week league, so what you did last week doesn't mean you're going to be able to repeat it this week, and all those things change. However, there is a 30,000-foot view that I think helps guys put it in perspective that we're our record is what it is. We're 1-3, but you got a chance to quickly get back in the mix if you can win a divisional game this week. You see most of the league outside of about 3 teams is either 3-2 or 2-3 or 2-2. So it's all jumbled up. You focus so much on your own team and your own process that every now and again, though, it does help to get some perspective of what happens around the league and where teams stand and where your division stands and where the AFC stands, and just to show that there's, it's pretty wide open still at this point, and a lot of things can go a lot of different directions at this juncture in the season. But yeah, I think you always have an awareness of what is happening, particularly in your division and certainly in the conference.
As Kenneth also says in the comments here, I think it echoes what Brian Callahan was saying, where Monty Python's "I'm not dead yet." It is but a flesh wound in terms of the season here for them. And so I think it's important to ask the question, as Brian Callahan also noted, how it's important to keep this confidence and kind of look at your season and what you've done well and what you've not done so well, and kind of make those adjustments post your bye to have a better, I guess you could call, rest of the season for this team. And so I do ask the question, how can the Titans improve the most post the bye week? And I think the easiest thing to look at is it starts with the quarterback. And I know we talk about Will Levis and what he's done over his first 4, well, more like 0.001 games for this team so far before the bye. And you look at some really interesting statistics here. I saw this earlier this week from Ben Baldwin, who goes by Computer Cowboy on Twitter. He kind of gave a graph here where he charted the charted versus production-based measures of quarterback play. And you look at this kind of going on the horizontal axis is the offensive grade according to PFF. And then on the vertical here is EPA per play, which is passes, rushes, and penalties. You look at the league and you have guys like Deshaun Watson who, don't have a great offensive grade, but are way down in terms of EPA per play. And it's a line that goes like this, basically. Well, Will Levis is fairly at the back of the pack, and it's not even close. I mean, if you're betting on a horse, like in the Kentucky Derby or something like that, it's almost like you bet on this horse and the horse is in the back because he struggled to get out of the gate, basically. And
like the horse is starting to get lapped by the
it does feel like that when you look at guys like that are at the top in terms of offensive grade and EPA. Jaden Daniels off the chart, basically. Yeah. Joe Burrow, Baker Mayfield, Brock Purdy, Derek Carr with his big start to the season. And those are the guys who are at the top of the list who have kind of set the league on fire with their early play here. And then you have Will Levis, who is trailing so far at the back of the pack. And I think that whether or not this conversation continues to be a boring one and one that we continue to emphasize, and it gets tiring at some point. But if you want any change to happen, you got to look at the quarterback situation. And this is one where I think Brian Callahan also pointed out that it's on him as well to be a better play caller and do some things differently. This is something that he's continued to emphasize, that it's not just it's on him as well. And I think Hurricane Lou brings up an interesting point where he says fair to expect major thematic offensive changes out at the break. I think this is something I'd really like to see. I would like to see more of Will Levis's targets be force-fed to Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins earlier in drives. As much as they use their tight ends and running backs effectively, and as much as the run game has been, up and down, but for the most part, really good for this team. I would like to see them getting more of those design looks to Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins earlier in games. Like we said on Friday's show, Calvin Ridley has averaged 2.25 receptions per game. Not good enough for a guy you're paying $50 million guaranteed over the next 2 years. I would like to see them use their weapons that have worked in the past a lot better. Stoney, any thoughts on that comment or anything that, the Titans need to improve on post the bye?
Yeah, I think this goes back to our report cards that we doled out on Friday, and we talked about Brian Callahan specifically as a play caller, head coach, maybe leaning into things that they're having more success with, right? It's not to say that this offense, I don't know that this offense does anything particularly well, but what we have seen, Treylon Burks disappointing in a few spots, maybe make the move and play a little more NWI, Nick Westbrook-Akine, maybe put him out there a little bit more. We've seen him have success adding a sixth offensive lineman and running the ball off of that. I mean, what's the rule that say you can't do that a little bit more? I mean, yeah, maybe these are Band-Aid fixes for the offense in the here and now, and maybe it doesn't benefit the team long-term in terms of letting this offensive scheme kind of sink in. But, what are you trying to accomplish right here? Are you trying to win games, or are you trying to install the new offense? I think at a certain point, things have to click for this team to be competitive. I think you need to see Will Levis keep cutting back on the boneheaded mistakes, right? We've gone from abject failures in week 1 to just regular old interceptions against the Packers and the Dolphins. So, you know what? As shitty as it sounds, as much cope as it sounds like, that's progress. If you can kind of keep things going and you lean into the things that you do successfully a little bit more, I think you can start to kind of get the offense back on track with this group. To Brian Callahan's point, I think the AFC wildcard race is wide open right now. There's light years between where the Titans are and where the Kansas City Chiefs are, and the Houston Texans, the Baltimore Ravens seem to be getting things going now too, even the Buffalo Bills. But those wild cards are currently occupied by the Denver Broncos, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Los Angeles Chargers. And while I think the Titans are far away from the top of the AFC, I don't think they're so far away from those teams. And if you go out, the optimist view of this thing is if you go out there and you beat the Colts and you get to 2-3 and you have a divisional win, it kind of changes the trajectory of this season. It's just a matter of this offense clicking, gelling, the coaching staff leaning into what works for this team, and ultimately executing upon it. And if they can do those things, maybe there is new life in this team. But I just don't think we've seen enough evidence to garner hope, to garner faith that it's actually going to happen.
I do think you bring up an interesting point. It's one that we've kind of, not to beat a dead horse again, but the fact that when you look at the advanced metrics of this team, they have so much more success playing more 12 personnel and having 2 tight end sets and having an extra lineman out there. And as much as that kind of limits you on the outside, and maybe that's not what Brian Callahan wants to run and how he wants his system to work at the end of the day, I do want to bring up something else. I do some work as well for a company called Fantasy Points, which is a data company. And part of that job is to chart some other teams around the league. And this week I charted the Chicago Bears, who with their new quarterback, Caleb Williams, has struggled a little bit out of the gate this season. What I saw from him in probably his best game so far of his career this year against the Carolina Panthers, albeit it is the Carolina Panthers, but you saw a lot of them using all 3 of their tight ends, Mercedes Lewis, Cole Kmet, and Gerald Everett, all the time in these. You're seeing those guys line up both on the outside of the linemen, but also in the slot, things that we haven't really seen from this team. Could we see Chig be used more in the way that they use Gerald Everett, which is kind of that glorified blocker, but then also poses a threat on the outside and keeping that team guessing? I think that's something that they could look into. Like you said, using Daniel Brunskill, who you, for what it's worth, has said is kind of the second best lineman on this team through 5 weeks so far. Could he be out there a lot more and kind of helping with kind of officiate and run the offense here, kind of giving Will Levis some extra time. I think those are all possible things. And then when you look at how the Titans team ranks after week 5, you look at the offense that they've had. Overall, they're 30th in the league. Pass 19th, run 18th. So, as much as well as they've done in the run game, they're still not above average in terms of the league. And so something has to change, I think, going out of the bye. And I think that's something I would hope Brian Callahan would look at and say, as much as I want my perfect scheme to work, we have to make adjustments to be more competitive in these games.
Yeah. And I know I've talked about it on this show, talking about how the scheme is getting receivers open. Guys are open, but Will Levis is not getting in the ball. He doesn't feel protected. He's drifting into sacks, all this stuff kind of compounding on top of it to sort of negate the passing game, to limit the passing game, so to speak. But I think it's really interesting. I don't know, JT, if you've ever heard somebody loses a football game and the line is, well, if they had been able to play 10 more minutes, they wouldn't have lost the game. It's kind of a situation I feel with the offensive line. I think there are signs of life with that group gelling. The way I've described it on this show is like 4 guys will hit and 1 guy will miss catastrophically. And we see a lot of that going on. But I do think J.C. Latham is getting better. I think Dylan Radins is getting better at right guard. If you keep kind of improving at this rate, it's kind of like I'm looking at it like, man, if there were 40 games in the season, by the time we got to game 30, this would be a really good offensive line. Yeah. But I do think this is a long-winded way of saying I do think there are some signs of life for this offensive line in the tape. Going up against a Miami team that was pretty beat up and just punishing them in the run game probably helps that feeling a little bit, but it's like, come on, guys, I know what's in there. Just shake loose and get to the next level. And then I think the offense will be helped exponentially by that.
Yeah, Kenneth says on the opposite side, it's also a real possibility we may have to confront a fire sale and quarterback purgatory within a couple of weeks from now. Could be sad days.
I mean, hey, if you read my article on stacking the inbox this week, it's pretty doom and gloom. I did not mean for it to sound like all hope is lost, but I checked in after the bye week and was like, yeah, I don't think this team's going anywhere this season. So.
Well, I mean, that does, we'll talk a little bit about the game upcoming where, if they do have any hope, it starts this week with their divisional opponent. The divisional ascent starts this week as they currently, for as bad as they've been, they still are in possession of 3rd place in their division because the Jacksonville Jaguars are a team and they play the team that the Jacksonville Jaguars beat last week, the Indianapolis Colts. And so before we talk a little bit about that, I have to ask you, do you think, this is, I think I already know the answer, but this feels like it is a must-win game for this team this week if they want any semblance of a pulse for the rest of the year. Yes?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. And then because the schedule is going to get harder immediately with trips to Buffalo, with trips to Detroit right after it. You look on down the schedule. I don't think the games against the Chargers, the Vikings, and the Commanders look like gimmies the way that they might have back in the summertime. Now, I know that's balanced by the cover your ears, the Bengals not looking as good as we thought they would look, and a couple of other teams like that. But I just think the schedule is going to be a lot harder for a team that's just trying to get their feet beneath them.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree there. And so this is, like you said, they being the Jacksonville Jaguars, beat up on the Indianapolis Colts. This is a team that they're not going to take lightly. And I think it's one that, it's a lesson. Even if you wanted to say that it was the Houston Texans week this week, your divisional opponents are different matchups any way you look at it, right? Like sure. One team could be in 1st place overall and the other team could be the worst team in the league. And you're still going to be in that situation where you find this game being an absolute nail biter between those two teams because they are your divisional opponent. They just work differently. There's something about them, your division rivals, that's going to make the game more competitive and make it a closer game than it should maybe be. And so Brian Callahan was asked about this upcoming matchup against the Indianapolis Colts, and here's what he had to say.
They like to do. Yeah, that's a really well coached offense. I've always been a fan of Shane, Jim Bob Cooter as well as offensive coordinator. Those guys know what they're doing. They know how to get guys open. they got the right players too, and to see the explosiveness they've had really over the last 2 seasons, you had to be on top of it because they're going to test you. They're going to test whether or not you're going to be able to keep a roof on them. And even if you can, they're going to find a way down the field. And that's one of the things they've done well, and it'll be a challenge for us. This is probably the most explosive offense that we've seen to date throughout this season so far, and in terms of what they've done production-wise. I mean, they've scored points and ate up yards and all those things. So I'm sure they feel similar to us that their 2-3 record isn't necessarily indicative of how well they've played at certain parts of the year. And they're going to test us, and we got to be ready for that.
Definitely are going to test them, Stoney. One word, I guess, or one phrase that you think is the most important this week for the Indianapolis Colts before on Friday we give a super in-depth one. I'll go first. It really does feel like, funny enough, that if Joe Flacco, 39-year-old former Super Bowl MVP, elite quarterback Joe Flacco, Easton Freeze's favorite quarterback of all time, it seems like, if he is indeed the guy to play this week, Brian Callahan brings up that this is one of the most explosive offenses that they've faced yet. The comment of, even if you got to keep the top on them, because they have guys like Alec Pierce and Michael Pittman who can just extend the field. You have the wild card in Adonai Mitchell, who has seen time at times this year for the Colts, been able to kind of break loose and get down the field, albeit with not much success in the throwing department there. But then you also have a guy like Josh Downs, who, much like in the Green Bay game, is a shifty receiver that's going to create a lot of problems for the inside guys. And so I think it's going to be a tall test for the defense to keep this team in check, because like he said, even if when you keep the roof on them, they're going to find a way to move down the field.
Yeah, I'm going to go cook some beef stroganoff for dinner, and then I'm going to start my Colts tape study tonight. But I can say on the surface, in a phrase, JT, covet the football, protect it on offense, go get it on defense. Too many times this season, we've seen this team give the football away, fail to take it away, and subsequently make it easier on their opponents to get back in the game when they've been ahead. You start like the basis for everything moving forward and turning this thing around at 1-3 is going to be coveting the football, protect it on offense, go get it on defense.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect way to sum it up. And that's something that we will dive into more on our in-depth episode on Friday, where we'll have heard from offensive coordinators, get some more insight there, and really get into, like you said, the tape study and watching this team. But Stoney, I told you before the show that I was hoping to get out of here in 30 minutes and go watch the Mets. I'm looking at the time now. It's 52 minutes and 27 seconds. And, I guess that's just because we're too good at our jobs on this show. And I hope
talking moon pies.
Yes. Talking moon pies, the death of John Ojukwu, not really. And, bye weeks. So with that being said, I think we're going to get out of here. Thank you all for watching. This has been the Hot Read Podcast, and we will see you on Friday.
Sinkers Beverages, Bluegrass
Sinkers Beverages. Thank you. Yep.